Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm coming out here to my West Side herb garden because this is where most of my lavender is. And I'm going to be harvesting some lavender leaves and be talking about how I use them. Now, when it comes to your lavender leaves, though I'll be talking about their uses in a minute, I want to talk just now about harvesting. You want to come out when you see them looking like this. Okay, when they're just fresh and green like that, and before you start getting your flowers. You're going to get a lot more leaves, just like many of your other herbs, if you harvest them before the flowers start coming on. And this will also increase the amount of flowers you get as well. So if if you've just got one lavender plant, it may be hard to kind of pinch these off first because you might be anxious at getting your flowers, especially if you start a little bit late like I did last year and you start seeing those buds coming on. But really, this is the best time to do it because you're not going to get as tasty of a leaf or as many of them if you wait until after you start getting your flowers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to harvest a whole bunch of these. I've got several plants here to harvest from, and let's see, what do I have? I have at least five. 4 of them are good size, and then I have 2 out in the main garden. I probably won't harvest off those today. These are my biggest, healthiest plants that I have. These are also my oldest. And so I'll finish doing this, and then I'm going to go inside and talk a little bit about what I do with my lavender leaves. All right, well, I'm back in the house, in the kitchen, obviously, and I've got a basket full of lavender leaves, and I haven't even harvested half of the fresh leaves, new leaves coming in for the spring. This is just a small amount, and I didn't even do any on the back garden. But this right here is more than enough to get me through the year. When it comes to the lavender leaves and which plant, I recommend going with the English lavender. To me, that one has the best flavor. There's some other lavenders that I had. I ended up pulling the plants out and getting rid of them because I really disliked the flavor of the leaves. And those are the ones, I don't remember if they were French or Spanish lavender, but they get a really big flower bud on it and then only have the petals at the very top. They get real long petals like this that open up, whereas your English lavender, it's going to open up all the way down and it's much smaller petals. The English lavender has the best for flavor. Now, it's not at all like the flower. Personally, I'm not crazy about the taste of a lavender flower, though I love lavender. I love using the flowers for making my floral vinegars, for washing my hair, for using in skin related stuff, for using as aromatherapy kind of thing. It's great. It has wonderful medicinal properties. And I still am going to give Amy Fuel's recipe, the lemon lavender pound cake, a try because it sounds wonderful. Now, when it comes to the medicinal properties of the leaves, I cannot tell you anything about that because I have not found any information, no matter where I go, about the leaves. The only thing I can find when it comes to medicinal properties is in reference to the flower itself. But the leaves are edible. I've been adding them to salads and dishes for a few years now. I love the flavor. It's not at all like the flower. The flower is very perfumey tasting, where the leaves have a more sweet flavor to them. They're somewhat similar to rosemary, but much more mild and sweet. Whereas the rosemary has a real strong flavor, which I like when I'm sprinkling it fresh on pastas and stuff. But the lavender doesn't have that. It's much more mild. It does have a distinct flavor, and it can be used as a rosemary replacement. So those of you who can grow lavender well, but maybe not rosemary, this may be the choice for you as far as having it for an herb for culinary purposes. Now, when it comes to the medicinal properties, since I cannot find any information about it, I'm going to venture a guess here. And my guess is that since they are edible and since they do have a flavor, usually if something has a strong flavor, it has medicinal properties of some sort, that it's going to have medicinal properties that should be similar to the flower, but maybe not as potent as you would find in the flower. That's just a guess, just based on what I know from plants in general and what I've been learning along the way, that if your flower has real strong medicinal properties, then the leaves will have some. Or if it's the leaves, then the flower will have some. It usually all goes together, but you only hear about the flower. But anyway, this is a great idea for culinary, if nothing else. And that's how I use it. I love it fresh on pastas. And some of you have been following my community posts here on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook. You may have seen a couple of posts I put up of my homemade pasta. I did one with moringa, and that was the one where I used the lavender leaves on there. So good. And then the one I did with the spirulina pasta, I used rosemary. Both are really good. Sometimes I'll use them in tandem, but obviously I can't have fresh lavender leaves year round for adding to my stews and my soups and my casseroles, because I also use them in that. So I will take these and I'm going to dehydrate them up. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do first is I'm going to spray them down with a little bit of homemade vinegar and let them sit for a bit, just like I did in the last video. I was talking about the herbs for the teas, and I'll post to that right up here. And then just let it sit for a few minutes and then rinse it. That's the most I'll do for washing. And then I'll get back to you on the dehydrating. Well, now that I've let them sit and rinsed them a bit, let them drain, I like to take them and just dump them out onto a towel to help soak up any excess moisture coming out of there. And you can have a chance to look through here and pick out anything that doesn't belong, like little twigs and whatever else. And when I'm doing small herbs like this, or the thyme, or the rosemary, I really like using this particular colander. It's also really good for rinsing out your grains, you know, your rice and your wheat berries after you've soaked them. Because it has real small holes in it. And I got this one on Amazon, and I'll go ahead and link to it below. It's just been a really great colander. Love this. And it's stainless steel. And you can either just let these kind of sit on the towel for a little bit, or you can just kind of take your towel and roll gently to kind of help absorb some of the extra moisture that's on them. But I'm going to dehydrate them anyway, so I'm not too worried about getting every last bit of moisture off of there. That will happen in the drying process. So I'm just going to put them on my tray over here. And it looks like I'll need to do a couple of trays. And then I'll let these dry at about 105 degrees. You don't want to go any higher than that for your herbs. 95 to 105 is a good choice for a setting if you're using an electric dehydrator. You can also air dry these, you know, on racks. It's going to take longer, obviously. And this time of year we have plenty of solar power, so I like running my electric dehydrators on that. In the wintertime, if I have anything to dehydrate, I do that near my wood stove, and that works really well with the racks that Patrick made. But I think those racks would probably work really good in the summertime too, depending on where you put them, in a place that gets plenty of air ventilation, you know, air flow, like if you have a fan running. And if you're interested in how he made the dehydrator rack, I can use it next to the wood stove, on top of the wood stove for making beef jerky and whatever. I'll go ahead and link to that right up here. Okay, well I'll get these on the other tray, and then I'll get them on my dehydrator in a bit. First I want to show you, while I was waiting for those to drain out, I went ahead and ran out and picked some of my dandelions and a few pansies and some dandelion leaves. I will go back out later in the day because it's been cloudy all morning, so it takes longer for the dandelions to open up when it's like that. So I'll go back out later. There's a bunch more ready to open up. I want to wait until they're fully opened, and I'll harvest them too. But for now, I'll get these sprayed down with vinegar and then rinse them and get them on the dehydrator as well. And here are the dried lavender leaves I did last year, and you can see how they look. They look very much like rosemary, so you want to make sure that you mark your jar. And I just will take a pinch of these and throw them in a dish of whatever I'm baking if I want to add that flavor. Sometimes I'll mix them with rosemary and use them side by side, especially in my Italian sauces. I really like doing that in there. And then one thing I always forget to mention is time. How long does it take in drying time to dry these? Well, it's going to depend on your setting. It's going to depend on where you have your dehydrator, what kind of dehydrator you're using. Typically for my herbs, especially, oh, and if you're using a Nesco like I use, it's also going to depend on how many trays you have. The top tray is always going to dry first if your element's at the top, and so you want to keep checking that. But it depends on the actual herbs. The lavender leaves, they don't take too long because they're small, but they're also a little bit on the thick side. Peppermint doesn't really take that long as far as the leaves. It's anywhere from 6 to 12 hours. It just depends, and it also depends on how packed down, you know, how much you fill up your trays. The more full the tray is, the longer it's going to take. So just keep an eye on it. I do not like running my dehydrator at night for several reasons. And one being that I run it off of solar power, so I don't like to drain my batteries through the night. But also because I want to be able to keep an eye on my stuff and keep checking it and not just, you know, just let it run without checking it. So I think it's a good idea to always, if you're doing an electric dehydrator, only run it during the day. But if you're air drying, it doesn't matter. You can just hang your herbs upside down or put them on trays somewhere and just let them dry. I would recommend even covering them with a loose, like covering your tray with a very thin mesh type cloth to help keep bugs and stuff out and dust and whatever. Like a chiffon fabric is really good because it's very airy and flowy, yet it's very, very tiny mesh so that it's not going to let much, if anything, through there. So that's just an idea if you're air drying. And other options for preserving, you can try freezing them. I've never done that. I've seen a lot of things where people will freeze herbs in ice cubes, and if they're herbs they're going to use in soups and things like that, they would add water to anyway. You just throw the ice cube in there. I haven't done that yet. I keep meaning to try it, and maybe one of these days I will. So the ice cube method is one way to do it to really preserve the flavor and freshness of the herbs if you like that. I just prefer to dehydrate everything that I can because it's going to take up far less room, but you are going to lose some of your flavor. However, when it comes to nutrients, you lose very little in the dehydrating process, especially if you're going with an air dry or a very low temp electric dehydrator. That's the best way to go. You actually lose far less nutrients in dehydrating your foods in general than you do when you're canning them, because canning them requires so much higher of a heat to do. Though I do love to can things, so I still can, but when it comes to any of my herbs, I always dehydrate those. And eventually we'll try doing the ice cube method. Hopefully I'll remember to try that this year. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you realize now you can go use those lavender leaves too. You don't have to just wait for the flowers. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.